You know, that specific kind of heartbreak that doesn't feel like a sharp pain, but rather like a heavy, cold stone dropping into the pit of your stomach? That is exactly what I felt standing outside the Gilded Oak Manor just an hour before the ceremony was supposed to begin. The late afternoon sun was hitting the sandstone columns of the venue, making everything look golden and magical. It was the perfect day for a wedding. My granddaughter, Chloe, had prayed for good weather for months, and it seemed the universe had delivered. I adjusted the strap of my handbag, took a deep breath to steady my nerves, and walked toward the entrance. I was so ready to see her walk down the aisle. I had been dreaming about this day since she was a little girl playing pretend bride with a pillowcase on her head. I approached the heavy oak doors, smiling at the security guard stationed there. He was a large man in a fitted black suit, holding a clipboard that looked tiny in his massive hands. I gave him a polite nod and moved to step past the velvet rope, expecting him to simply smile back and let me through. Instead, he stepped sideways, blocking my path with his body. It wasn't aggressive, but it was firm. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at me, and I saw a flash of genuine discomfort in his eyes. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly wishing he was anywhere else but there. He told me to wait a moment while he checked the list again. I chuckled nervously and told him my name is Evelyn, and that I am the grandmother of the bride, so surely I am on the list. He ran his finger down the paper, flipped a page, and then winced. He cleared his throat and told me that he was sorry, but my name had been flagged. I asked him what he meant by flagged. He lowered his voice, leaning in slightly so the other arriving guests wouldn't hear. He told me that he had strict instructions from the bride herself not to admit anyone who wasn't on the approved list, and specifically he had been given a description of a woman matching my appearance who was to be turned away. My breath hitched. I felt the blood drain from my face. I thought it had to be a mistake. A misunderstanding. Maybe a prank? Chloe had a strange sense of humor sometimes. I told him to please call her or her mother, but he just shook his head. Suddenly, the heavy doors pushed open, and the sound of frantic whispering spilled out. It wasn't Chloe's mother. It was Chloe herself. She stormed out, flanked by two of her bridesmaids who were dressed in that dusty rose color that is so popular right now. Chloe looked breathtaking, I have to admit. Her dress was a custom mermaid cut with intricate lace that I knew cost more than my first car. But her face was twisted into a scowl that made her look unrecognizable. She didn't look like the sweet girl I used to bake cookies with. She looked like a stranger. She marched right up to the velvet rope, her eyes scanning me from head to toe with pure disgust. Now, before I tell you exactly what she said to me that shattered my heart, I want to take a quick second to ask you a favor. If you are already hooked on this drama, go ahead and hit that like button for me, it really helps the channel. Also, drop a comment down below right now telling me what time it is where you are and what country or city you are watching from. I love scrolling through and seeing how far my story travels around the world. Are you done? Awesome. Let's get back to the moment my granddaughter crushed my soul. Chloe stopped about 3 feet away from me, maintaining a safe distance as if poverty was contagious. She crossed her arms over her chest and asked me loudly what I was doing there. I was baffled. I told her I was there for her wedding. I told her I was there to see her get married. She let out a harsh, cruel laugh and looked at her friends, who smirked in return. She pointed a manicured finger at my dress. It was a floral print dress, modest, clean, and well-pressed. It was the dress I wore to my own 40th anniversary dinner with her grandfather before he passed. It meant the world to me. Chloe didn't care about sentiment. She told me that I looked like I had just crawled out of a charity bin. She said my outfit was an eyesore and that she had told me weeks ago the theme was modern luxury, not nursing home chic. I tried to reason with her. I kept my voice calm even though I wanted to cry. I told her that this was the best I had and that I thought I looked nice. I told her I just wanted to be there to support her. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous hiss. She said that she had influencers coming. She said there was a photographer from a major bridal magazine who might stop by. She told me that she had curated a perfect aesthetic for her Instagram, and having me in the background looking poor and dusty would ruin the entire vibe of the photos. She actually used those words. She said I didn't fit the brand she was trying to build. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the security guard who was staring at the ground, clearly embarrassed for me. I looked back at Chloe. I asked her if she was seriously uninviting me because of my clothes. She rolled her eyes and gave me an ultimatum. She said I could stay, but only if I agreed to sit in the back room where the catering staff took their breaks during the ceremony. She said I couldn't be in any professional photos and I definitely couldn't sit in the front row. I had to be invisible. If I couldn't agree to that, I had to leave. The sheer audacity was stunning. Here I was, clutching my purse, which contained the receipt for the venue she was standing in. I had emptied my savings to make this day happen, and she was treating me like a stain on her carpet. I stared at her, waiting for a crack in the facade, waiting for her to say she was stressed and didn't mean it. But the crack never came. She just checked her reflection in the glass door and waited for me to leave. I stood there for a long moment after the heavy wooden doors clicked shut, staring at the grain of the oak. The security guard, bless his heart, looked like he wanted to dig a hole and crawl into it. He mumbled a quiet apology, shifting his weight again, but I barely heard him. My mind was reeling, spinning back through the years, trying to pinpoint exactly where I had gone wrong. How does a sweet little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile turn into someone who would banish her own grandmother to a catering closet because of a polyester dress? The irony of the situation was so thick I could practically taste it, bitter and metallic on my tongue. You see, Chloe didn't just inherit this attitude out of thin air. She had grown up watching her mother, my daughter Sarah, chase status symbols she couldn't afford, while I was the one quietly sweeping up the mess behind them. To understand why that rejection stung so badly, you have to understand what I gave up to be standing on that welcome mat. I wasn't just a distant relative who sent a check inside a birthday card once a year. I was the one who was there. When Sarah was finding herself in Europe for 6 months, I was the one making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for Chloe's school lunches. When Chloe fell off her bike and needed stitches, I was the one holding her hand in the emergency room while Sarah was at a wine tasting. I was the constant. I was the safety net. And because I wanted Chloe to have a better life, to have the things I never had, I became a master of frugality. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. My furniture is older than Chloe is. I drive a sedan that rattles when it goes over 40 miles per hour, and I haven't bought a new winter coat in 6 years. People in our town, and clearly my own granddaughter, look at me and see a little old lady who is barely scraping by. They see the worn shoes and the dated handbags and assume I'm destitute. They whisper that it's a shame Evelyn didn't plan better for her retirement. But what they don't know, what nobody knew, was that I was sitting on a nest egg. My late husband, God rest his soul, was a wise man. He left me comfortable. But instead of spending that money on cruises or fancy condos, I earmarked it. I created a mental Chloe fund the day she was born. This wedding was supposed to be the culmination of all that saving. When Chloe announced her engagement to Mark, a nice boy, though a bit spineless, she was in tears because she couldn't afford her dream venue. The Gilded Oak Manor is the kind of place you see in movies. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a garden that looks like Versailles. Costs a fortune just to breathe the air in there. Her mother, of course, had no money to help, having spent her own inheritance on leased luxury cars and bad investments. Chloe was devastated. She was talking about going to the courthouse, crying about how her special day was ruined. That broke me. I couldn't stand to see her so heartbroken over money when I had the power to fix it. So I did what grandmothers do. I stepped in, but I did it silently. I didn't want Chloe to feel guilty, and honestly, I didn't want her mother sniffing around my finances asking for a loan that would never be repaid. I made an appointment with the venue manager, a man named Mr. Henderson. I sat in his plush office, wearing the same coat Chloe just sneered at, and I wrote a cashier's check for $50,000. That covered the venue rental, the premium catering package, the lighting, and the open bar. I told Mr. Henderson strictly, "This is an anonymous gift. Tell her a donor covered it or tell her she won a raffle, I don't care. Just make sure she gets the date she wants." I remembered the look on Mr. Henderson's face when I handed him the check. He was surprised, judging the book by its cover just like everyone else, but he was professional. He shook my hand and promised to keep my secret. And he did. Chloe called me screaming with joy a few days later, saying the venue had worked something out, and offered her a magical discount package. I just smiled over the phone, eating my canned soup dinner, happy that she was happy. I felt like a fairy godmother. I thought my reward would be seeing her shine on her big day, knowing I made it happen. But standing there outside the venue, the reality hit me like a bucket of ice water. The aesthetic she was so worried about preserving? I bought that. The marble floor she didn't want my cheap shoes walking on? I paid for them to be polished. The very exclusive atmosphere she was trying to curate by kicking me out was entirely funded by the woman she was calling an eyesore. My poverty was a choice I made so she could have her luxury. I looked down at my dress again. It wasn't designer, but it was clean. It was respectful. And it was paid for with my own honest money, unlike the fairy tale she was living in. The security guard cleared his throat again, bringing me back to the present. "Ma'am," he said softly, "maybe you should just go to the back entrance? I can show you where the staff break room is. It has a TV, maybe you can hear the music from there." He was trying to be kind, trying to find a compromise, but the suggestion sparked a fire in my belly that I hadn't felt in years. Sit in the break room? Watch my granddaughter's wedding on a blurry monitor while sitting next to a dishwasher? No, absolutely not. The sadness that had been weighing down my shoulders began to evaporate, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I had sacrificed my comfort for her happiness, and her response was to hide me like a dirty secret. Well, if she wanted a perfect aesthetic, she was about to learn exactly what that aesthetic actually cost. I walked away from the entrance, not toward the parking lot to leave, and certainly not toward the back alley where the staff entrance was located. Instead, I walked around the side of the building to a small stone bench near the manicured hedges. I needed a moment to think, to let the fire in my belly settle into a steady burn rather than an explosive rage. I sat down, smoothing the skirt of my floral dress, the one that had just been deemed an aesthetic violation, and watched the guests arriving. It was a parade of high fashion and higher pretension. Women in slinky silk gowns that looked more like lingerie than formal wear, men in suits that were too tight in the ankles. They all looked perfect. They all looked exactly like the brand Chloe was trying to sell. And none of them, not a single one, had likely contributed a dime to the event. As I sat there, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. For a fleeting second, I thought maybe she had come to her senses. Maybe she was texting to apologize, to tell me it was just wedding jitters and that she needed her grandma. I opened the message with trembling fingers. It read, "Just checking you went to the back room. Seriously, Grandma, don't try to sneak in the front. The photographer is setting up the arrival shots now and I can't have you in the background. Stay out of sight until the reception starts, then maybe you can sit at the far table near the kitchen." I stared at the screen. The audacity was actually impressive. It wasn't just a moment of stress. It was a calculated decision. She was ashamed of me. She was managing me like a problem to be solved, a blemish to be covered up with concealer. I remembered when she was 10 and she begged me to buy her a specific brand of jeans because the other girls made fun of her. I worked overtime cleaning houses for 3 weeks to buy those jeans. I remembered the pride on her face when she wore them. I had created this monster, hadn't I? By shielding her from the reality of money, from the value of hard work and gratitude, I had allowed her to believe that appearance was the only currency that mattered. Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the valet. Out stepped a young woman with neon pink hair and a camera crew trailing behind her. I recognized her vaguely from one of the videos Chloe was always watching. Some influencer with a few 100,000 followers. Chloe ran out of the venue, practically tripping over her mermaid gown, squealing with delight. She embraced the girl, posing instantly for the cameras, flashing a dazzling, practiced smile. "So glad you could make it," Chloe gushed, her voice pitching up an octave. "Everything is perfect, just wait until you see the lighting inside." The contrast was nauseating. She had time to fawn over a stranger from the internet, but she couldn't spare a shred of dignity for the woman who raised her. That was the moment the secondary challenge of my internal conflict resolved itself. I had been wrestling with the guilt of ruining her day versus the pain of being mistreated. But watching her perform for the cameras, I realized there was no moral dilemma here. The dilemma was hers and she had already failed it. She chose vanity over family. She chose the image of wealth over the source of it. I wasn't just fighting for my own dignity anymore. I was fighting for a lesson that she desperately needed to learn. If I walked away now, or if I hid in that break room like a scolded dog, I would be validating her behavior. I would be telling her that it's okay to treat people like disposable props as long as you get your perfect photo. I couldn't do that. I loved her too much to let her stay this shallow. But the conflict deepened when I saw Mark, the groom. He stepped out to join Chloe, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. He spotted me sitting on the bench. Our eyes met. He hesitated, looking from me to Chloe, who was busy fixing her hair for a selfie. He took a half step toward me, clearly wanting to say hello or ask why I was sitting outside. But then Chloe snapped her fingers at him, pointing to a spot next to her where she wanted him to stand for the photo. Mark froze. He looked at me one last time, a silent apology in his eyes, and then turned his back on me to obey his bride. That was the final straw. Even the good ones were enabling this madness. The entire charade was built on a foundation of fake appearances and spineless compliance. I stood up. My knees popped, a reminder of my age, a reminder of the years of labor my body had endured. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to scream or cry or throw a drink. That's what people expect from a crazy old lady. I was going to do something much more effective. I was going to remove the one thing holding this entire house of cards together. I checked my watch. It was 4:15 p.m. The ceremony was scheduled for 5 p.m. I had 45 minutes. I took my phone out again, but this time I didn't open my messages. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to H. Henderson, the venue manager. I pressed call and held the phone to my ear, watching Chloe laugh artificially at something the influencer said. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello, this is Mr. Henderson, Gilded Oak Manor." The voice answered, smooth and professional. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice steady and calm, devoid of the trembling sadness I felt earlier. "This is Evelyn. We met a few months ago regarding the payment for the wedding today." "Ah, yes, Mrs. Evelyn. Wonderful to hear from you," he replied cheerfully. "I assume you're enjoying the ambience? We have the gold lighting package set up just as requested." "I'm actually standing outside," I said, my eyes fixed on my granddaughter. "And I'm afraid there's been a change of plans." "A change of plans?" Mr. Henderson's voice faltered slightly, the professional cheerfulness dipping into cautious confusion. "I'm not sure I understand, Mrs. Evelyn. The ceremony is starting in less than an hour. The guests are being seated. The hors d'oeuvres are being plated." I turned my back on the venue, facing the quiet garden where a stone fountain trickled peacefully. It was such a stark contrast to the chaos about to unfold. "Mr. Henderson, do you have the contract in front of you? Or at least, do you recall the specific clause regarding the payment source?" I could hear the shuffling of papers on the other end, followed by the clicking of a keyboard. "I can pull it up. Yes, here it is. Paid in full via cashier's check by yourself. Listed as the primary financial guarantor. Why do you ask?" "And I assume," I continued, watching a butterfly land on a rosebush, "that since I am the financial guarantor, I have the authority to cancel services?" There was a long silence on the line. A heavy, pregnant silence. "Mrs. Evelyn," he said slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Technically, yes. As the payer, the contract is between you and the venue. But, surely you aren't suggesting, we are 40 minutes from curtain time." "I am currently being barred from entering the building, Mr. Henderson," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "My granddaughter, the bride, has instructed security that I am not to be admitted because my clothing does not fit her aesthetic. She has offered me a seat in the staff break room if I wish to stay on the premises." "Good Lord," Mr. Henderson gasped. The professionalism cracked completely. He sounded genuinely horrified. "I paid $50,000 for this event," I said, my voice hardening. "I paid for the crystal glasses she is drinking from. I paid for the chair she is sitting on. I paid for the security guard who is currently blocking my path. If I am not welcome at the party I paid for, then there is no party. I can come down there right now," Mr. Henderson stammered. "I can speak to the bride. I can ensure you have a front row seat. We can fix this." "No," I cut him off. "That's not what I want. If you have to force her to let me in, then I've already lost. She made her choice. Now I'm making mine. I want you to cancel the contract. Immediately. Mrs. Evelyn, if I cancel now, the refund policy, you won't get everything back. And the disruption." "I don't care about the refund," I lied. Of course I cared, that was my life savings. But at that moment the money felt like dirty paper. "Keep the deposit. Keep whatever penalties you need to keep. But I want the services stopped. I want the bar closed. I want the lighting turned off. I want the music cut. I want the staff to pack up." "Are you absolutely certain?" Mr. Henderson asked. "Once I make the call to the floor manager, there is no going back. It will be catastrophic." I looked back toward the entrance one last time. Chloe was still there, now snapping selfies with her bridesmaids, completely oblivious to the grandmother she had discarded. She looked happy. She looked triumphant. She looked like she had gotten away with it. "Do it," I said. "Pull the plug." "Very well," Mr. Henderson said, his voice solemn. "I'm making the call now." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. It was adrenaline. It was the feeling of taking back control. I walked back toward the main entrance, but I didn't try to go in. I stood near the valet stand, where I had a clear view of the ballroom's massive glass windows. Inside I could see the guests mingling. The room was bathed in a warm golden glow from the thousands of fairy lights and the massive crystal chandeliers I had paid for. The band was playing a soft jazz number. Waiters were circulating with trays of expensive champagne. It looked perfect. It looked magical. And then it happened. Started with the music. The jazz band suddenly stopped playing mid-note. I saw the lead singer tap his microphone, looking confused, then shrug and step back. The guests looked around, murmuring. A few seconds later, the bar staff stopped pouring drinks. I saw a manager in a black suit, not Mr. Henderson but his floor manager, walk up to the bar and say something to the bartenders. They immediately began corking bottles and clearing the counter. But the real showstopper was the lights. One moment the room was a golden palace. The next clack. The massive chandeliers went dark. Then the fairy lights wrapped around the columns flickered and died. The uplighting on the walls cut out. The room plunged into the gray, dim natural light of the late afternoon. It wasn't pitch black, but the vibe was instantly murdered. The magical atmosphere vanished, replaced by the dull reality of a large, unlit hall. Through the glass I saw the panic set in. Guests were pulling out their phones, using the flashlights to see better. Chloe, who had just walked inside for her grand entrance rehearsal, froze in the center of the dance floor. I saw her mouth moving, screaming at someone. She was pointing at the ceiling, stomping her foot. Her perfect aesthetic had just been literally turned off. The security guard at the door, the one who had stopped me earlier, touched his earpiece. He listened for a moment, his eyes widening. He looked over at me standing by the valet stand. I didn't look away. I held his gaze, my chin high. He looked back at the chaotic scene inside, then back at me, and a slow realization dawned on his face. He knew. He knew exactly who had pulled the trigger. The chaos inside the Gilded Oak Manor was like watching a silent movie of a shipwreck. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw Chloe frantically grabbing the arm of the floor manager. Even from 50 yards away I could read her lips. She was screaming, "What is happening? Turn the lights back on." Her face, which had been so smug just minutes ago, was now a mask of sheer panic. The floor manager, a stoic woman with a clipboard, simply shook her head and gestured to her staff. The waiters were already stripping the tablecloths off the tables in the background. The bar was closed. The band was packing up their instruments. Then Chloe's phone must have rung. She pulled it out of her hidden pocket, looked at the screen and answered it. I knew it was Mr. Henderson. I could almost hear his voice explaining that the funding for the event had been withdrawn by the primary sponsor. I watched her face crumble. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was confusion. She looked around the room, her eyes darting wildly until they stopped. She looked out the window. She looked right at me. I hadn't moved. I was still standing near the valet stand, clutching my old handbag. We locked eyes through the glass. It was a moment of perfect clarity. He knew. She realized in that split second that the poor grandmother she had tried to hide was the only reason she was standing in that ballroom at all. I saw her mouth the word, "Grandma." It was a question, a plea, and a realization all at once. She started running toward the doors. She pushed past the confused guests, past her bridesmaids who were busy live-streaming the disaster, and burst out into the driveway. "Grandma," she yelled, stumbling slightly in her mermaid dress. "Grandma, wait. What did you do?" I didn't yell back. I didn't raise my voice. I waited until she was close enough to hear me without me having to shout. "I canceled the check, Chloe," I said simply. You what?" She gasped, stopping a few feet from me. "You can't do that. It's my wedding. Everyone is here. The influencers are here." "I know," I said. "And you wanted everything to be perfect. You wanted a specific aesthetic. You told me I didn't fit that aesthetic. You told me I looked poor." I took a step closer to her. "Well, Chloe, now you can have the wedding that you can afford. Since I'm too poor to be seen here, my money is too poor to be spent here. Grandma, please. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. I didn't mean it like that. I was just stressed. Please call them back. Tell them to turn the lights on. I'll let you sit in the front. I swear. You'll let me? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Chloe, you don't get it. You don't get to let me do anything. I'm not a prop. I'm your grandmother. I wiped your nose. I paid for your college books. And today I paid for this entire venue. But you were so ashamed of me that you tried to hide me in a closet. I'm sorry, she wailed, trying to grab my hand. I pulled away. You're sorry you got caught, I said. You're sorry the lights went out. You're not sorry you hurt me. If I hadn't canceled the check, I'd be sitting in that break room right now, and you'd be dancing in there laughing about how you handled the problem. I turned to the valet who had brought my rattling old sedan around. He opened the door for me with more respect than anyone had shown me all day. Grandma, where are you going? Chloe shrieked. You can't leave. You have to fix this. I am fixing it, I said, getting into the car. I'm teaching you the lesson your mother never did. You can't filter reality, Chloe. And you certainly can't filter people. Being poor isn't a sin. But being ungrateful? That's ugly. And no amount of lighting can hide that. I slammed the door. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Chloe was standing in the driveway, sobbing, while her guests started to filter out of the dark venue, looking confused and annoyed. I saw the influencer with the pink hair filming Chloe's breakdown. It was going to be viral, all right. Just not the way Chloe wanted. I didn't go home and cry. I went to a diner down the road, a place with flickering fluorescent lights and cracked vinyl seats. I ordered a slice of cherry pie and a coffee. It was the best pie I'd ever tasted. I sat there $50,000 richer, and for the first time in a long time I felt respected. Not by anyone else but by myself. So that's my story. I haven't spoken to Chloe since that day. I hear through the grapevine that the wedding was a total wash. Most guests left within the hour to go to a bar down the street. Chloe is apparently telling people I went senile and ruined her day, but the family knows the truth. And now so do you. If you enjoyed this story of petty revenge, or maybe just justice, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And hey, drop a comment below. Was I too harsh? Or did she get exactly what she deserved? I'll be reading your replies. Thanks for watching, and remember, never bite the hand that feeds you, especially if that hand is holding the checkbook.